in the moment, if you're thinking, is this mundane consciousness or is this super mundane consciousness? That's neither. That's a thought. If I talk about it mechanistically, I would say there's a way to use consciousness as a sort of sense gate. It's like a sixth sense gate, cognition, maybe you could call it. And there's a way to keep attention just there, but it's reflective in nature. So when there's sound, as you're approaching, like, say, non-dual realization, you may start to notice the reflection of sound in consciousness appearing almost simultaneously with what's actually there, which I'll just call sound, but it's rather sort of different in a way than the conscious reflection of it. So you may notice that at some point. Not everybody does. Sometimes it's just gone and there's just pure sound, pure sense. But you may notice the mind also reflects it in consciousness. And then at some point, the experience of consciousness itself may appear to be like staccato, like it might appear and disappear, like everything does, like sound does and sensation does. It's like popping in and out of existence or something. But it's very hard to talk about that, because if I talk about it, I know that the mind can make a map of it and then kind of like try to understand it or try to turn your experience into it. I would actually prefer that you explore your own experience and see what makes the most sense to you experientially. Because if you're thinking about this, if you're going, well, is it this or is it that? Is it what Angelo said or is it what this other guy said? That is always a thought. So then, maybe if that pops up, then just return to the thinkingness, the knowingness, which the thought sort of appears as, or sort of appears from or as, but that knowingness can exist on its own without a thought. That's the insight that I'm talking about when I talk about knowingness or consciousness. The insight that a thought can appear sort of quote unquote made out of consciousness. What else would it be made out of? But consciousness also knows itself without the thought. That's really the first insight. That's awakening, when that's really clear. Typically, it's pure knowing. So it's not a subject-object experience. It's a knowingness. It's a pure experience right now of conscious without that consciousness forming into a thought. Don't worry about it. Don't conceptualize it. If that feels like a natural practice for you to rest as that, great. At some point, it will naturally lead you to an exploration of the sense fields. And you can also do them intermittently, like as different practices. That's fine. In the moment, if you're thinking, is this mundane consciousness or is this super mundane consciousness? That's neither. That's a thought. I tend to be very simple about things. That's why I try not to use too much spiritual terminology, although some of it's really good, like mu, because it's not a concept and it's not a term. It's an archetype almost, right? It's almost like a life force. But for the most part, I really try to avoid very specific spiritual terms for this exact reason, right? You can look at Dzogchen that has not millions, but thousands and thousands of different terms and very precise terminology, and like a really, I don't know about a fixation, but it's a very high importance is placed on concepts, and very specific concepts about very specific things and aspects of realization and all that. And then you could talk about Zen, which has some, but Zen is very much direct. It's all about mostly just direct experience. But it wouldn't even say that. It's a lot about just Zazen, and then some koans come into play and so forth, but they're non-conceptual, right? So, but those are both Buddhism. Then you could look at Theravadan Buddhism. It has a whole other different sort of approach and its set of principles. And so there are all these different sects of Buddhism that are going to use concepts in very different ways. But what we're talking about underneath it all, when we talk about realization, is absolutely the same experience. So that's why I say, like, if you get into the mind about, is it this or is it this or is it this, at some point you have to leave that behind and go into your own experience primarily, until the experience is so alive and so clear that it sort of speaks for itself. Meaning, I don't mean conceptually or through words speaks. I don't mean you're speaking, but it just has its own legs. The clarity of realization is what the point is. That's it. And then you may speak about it, or you may not speak about it. It doesn't matter. But it's got to be away from differentiating between concepts of this sect and that teacher and this teacher. Even
Yeah.
mine, like over time, the theoretical ability to explain it to others will come, but it doesn't come through contemplation as much as it just comes naturally. It comes
Mm.
spontaneously. Like I tell people a lot, the words I'm saying now, I don't know where they come from. They just come out of nowhere. I don't even know why I know to talk about what I talk about. I really don't know.